Okay, sit down. I have to tell you what I saw today. I have been in that courtroom before. I've watched cases. I've heard people argue, cry, beg, and deny. I've seen judges who were tired and judges who were sharp. I thought I'd seen it all. But what happened today? What I watched happen between a sister and her own brother right in front of Judge Laika. I'm still thinking about it. Hours later, I'm still thinking about it. I want to tell you everything from the beginning. Because if I just skip to the ending, you won't feel what I felt when it happened. And I need you to feel it. So let's go back. Back to this morning. Back to the moment I walked into that courtroom and felt something heavy already sitting in the air. This is the story of Nadia and Tarik, and a house that should have kept a family together, but almost tore it apart forever. Before I tell you what happened in that room, I need to tell you who was in it. Because this isn't just a legal case. This is a real family. And families are complicated. And pain inside a family, real deep pain, looks different from pain between strangers. The woman who sat on the left side of that room, her name is Nadia. She's 34 years old. She is a single mother. 3 children, a boy who just turned 8, a girl who was 6, and a baby girl who is only 2 years old. Her husband died 3 years ago, quietly, suddenly. One morning there and one morning gone. So since then, Nadia has been doing it alone. Everything alone. For the past few years, she and her 3 children have been living in her father's house. A big, old family home. The kind of home that has lived in a family so long, it becomes part of you. You know every sound it makes at night. You know which window lets in the morning light first. You know the smell of it when it rains. You know where your father used to sit in the evenings when the day was done. That house was Nadia's whole world. And it was her children's whole world too. Her father, everyone called him Mr. Hassan. He passed away 8 months ago. Heart attack, no warning. No time to say anything important, just there one day, gone the next. And then things moved very, very fast. Because the second Mr. Hassan was gone, his son appeared. Tarik, Nadia's older brother, 38 years old. He had moved out of the family home years ago. He had his own place, his own life. He didn't visit much when their father was sick. Not much at all. But the day after the funeral, the day after they put Mr. Hassan in the ground, Tarik showed up with papers. A will that said Mr. Hassan had left the entire family home to his son, Tarik. Everything. The whole house. Just to Tarik. Nadia stood there holding those papers and said she felt like the ground disappeared under her feet. She said she had never, not once, not ever, heard her father talk about a will. Not in her whole life. And she knew this man. She had lived with him. She had sat next to him at dinner, walked next to him to the market, cried next to him at her husband's grave. A man like that doesn't have secrets, not big ones. Tarik got a court order 2 months ago. And one morning, while Nadia's youngest was in her arms and her older kids were just waking up, there was a knock at the door. And they told her she had 24 hours to leave, her own childhood home. She had nowhere to go. She packed what she could, she took her babies, and she went to stay at her friend's house. 3 children, all her belongings in bags, sleeping in someone else's spare room. For 2 months. And then today. Today she walked into Judge Laika's court, and she said, "I am not done fighting." I got there early. The case was scheduled for 9 in the morning, and I was already in my seat by 8:30. The courtroom filled up slowly. By the time the session was close to starting, there were maybe 25, maybe 30 people in the room. Some were there for the case. Some were there because they knew one of the people involved. A few were just observers like me, but every single person in that room could feel it. That tension, that invisible pressure, the kind that sits in your chest before something important is about to happen. Nadia walked in first. I watched her from the moment she came through the door. She walked slowly. Her back was straight, but her shoulders held a kind of weight. The weight of someone who hasn't slept properly in a long time. Her eyes were clear, but slightly red around the edges. She looked around the room once, briefly, the kind of look that isn't really looking for anything specific, just checking where she is, reminding herself this is real. She sat down at the table on the left. She placed a folder in front of her. She folded her hands on top of it. And then she was very still. I've seen people pace. I've seen people fidget, whisper to themselves, tap their fingers. Nadia did none of that. She just sat there, still and quiet, like someone who has already done their crying somewhere private and now has nothing left except to be present for this. Tarik walked in about 4 minutes later. If Nadia carried weight in her body, Tarik carried something else. He walked in like a man who had prepared for this. Chin slightly up, steps measured. There was a faint smile on his face. Not big, not obvious. But it was there. The smile of someone who thinks they already know how this ends. He sat down at the table on the right. He did not look at his sister. Not once. But here's what I noticed. And I noticed it right away because I was watching closely. His right knee under the table was bouncing. Just a small, quick, restless bounce. Over and over. He was not as calm as he was pretending to be. The people around me started to whisper. The woman sitting to my left leaned to the person next to her and murmured something. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the tone. Concern. Sadness. The kind of sound people make when they watch something unfair and feel helpless about it. Then someone near the back of the room said quietly, "That poor woman." And someone else replied, just as quietly, "Wait and see." And then the door at the front of the courtroom opened, and Judge Laika walked in. I want to try to tell you about Judge Laika properly, because she matters in this story. She matters a lot. She isn't a large woman. She doesn't fill the room physically. But the moment she walked in, the room changed. It's hard to explain. It's like when a room gets very quiet before a storm. That sudden, total stillness. That's what happened when Judge Laika walked in. She moved without rushing. She didn't look around at anyone. She came to her seat, sat down, placed her hands flat on the surface of the bench, and looked at the papers in front of her. Then she looked up. She looked at Tarik first, then at Nadia. 2 looks, each one brief but not quick. There is a difference between a brief look and a quick look. A quick look skips over you. A brief look sees you completely and then moves on. Judge Laika's eyes saw both of them completely before she spoke a single word, and then she spoke. Her voice was calm. Not cold, calm. There is a difference there too. Cold means you don't care. Calm means you care very much, but you will not be moved by emotion. That was Judge Laika. Judge Laika. We are here today in the matter of Nadia versus Tarik, regarding the estate of the late Mr. Hassan, specifically the family property. The document before this court, a will submitted by Tarik, is being challenged by Nadia on grounds that it may have been altered. I want to be completely clear about something before we begin. I am not here to take anyone's side. I am here to find the truth. I have been doing this job for a long time. And in all that time, there is one thing that has never failed me. The truth always finds a way to come out. Always. She paused, not for effect. She genuinely paused, like she was giving that sentence a moment to land. Judge Laika. So here's what I ask of both of you today. Speak honestly. That is all. This court will not be kind to anything else. She straightened her papers. Judge Laika. Nadia, you are the one bringing this case. I want to hear from you first. Tell me in your own words, why do you believe this will is not genuine? Nadia stood up. She smoothed the front of her clothes with both hands, just once, a small, nervous gesture. And then she lifted her face toward Judge Laika. She took one slow, deep breath, and then she began. Her voice was not strong at first. It was the voice of someone trying very hard to hold something together. Not weak, never weak, but working. Working to stay even. Nadia, Judge Laika, my father was not a man who kept secrets. He was an open man, a simple man. All his life he always told us, he told me and Tarik both, that the house is for the family. He said it many times. Sitting at the dinner table, in the garden, on evenings when we were all together, he would say, "This house is for all of us. It is for the children after me." Those were his exact words. For the children after me. She stopped for a moment. Her throat moved. Nadia, when my brother came to me with this will, right after our father's burial, I was confused, and then I was shocked, and then I was scared, because I knew right away something was wrong. My father never once mentioned a will to me, not one time in 34 years of my life. He never said, "Nadia, I have written a will." He never said, "Nadia, I want to tell you what happens to the house when I am gone." Nothing, not once. Judge Laika was watching her carefully. Her face was still and attentive. She was listening in the way that really good listeners listen, not waiting for their turn to speak, but actually taking in every word. Nadia. And when I read what was in the will, when I saw it gave everything to Tarik and nothing to me or my children, I thought, this cannot be right. This is not my father. This is not the man I knew, because my father loved my children. He loved them with everything he had. He watched them grow. He would carry my youngest on his shoulders in the garden. He would read to my son at night when he visited. He would never, never leave those children without a home. I saw something flicker across Tarik's face at that moment, something small and fast, like a flinch. He covered it quickly. He looked straight ahead again. Nadia continued. Nadia, but I also found something specific, something concrete, like you asked for. My father had a small stroke 4 years ago. He recovered well enough to walk, to talk, to live his life, but it affected his right hand, his writing hand. After the stroke, his handwriting was different, slower, a little shaky. Any letter he wrote after that stroke, I've kept many of them. His signature is different. You can see the tremor in it, the weakness, but the signature on this will, the will that Tarik brought, it looks like my father's old signature, his strong signature, the way he signed things before the stroke. The room changed when she said that. I felt it like a pressure shift. People sat up straighter. Someone near the back of the room drew in a breath. A woman 3 seats away from me put her hand over her mouth. Judge Laika leaned forward, just slightly. Judge Laika, let me make sure I understand you correctly. The will is dated 3 years ago. Nadia. Yes, Judge. Judge Laika. 3 years ago, your father had already suffered the stroke. Nadia. Yes, the stroke was 4 years ago, so 3 years ago, when this will was supposedly written and signed. His hand should have been shaky, unsteady. That is what every letter he wrote in those years shows, but the signature on that will is not shaky. It does not look like the signature of a man with a trembling hand. Judge Laika. And you have these letters with you today? Nadia. Yes, I brought 6 of them, all written by my father in the last 3 years of his life. Judge Laika. Good. Judge Laika wrote something down. She didn't hurry. She finished what she was writing, then looked at Tarik. Judge Laika. Tarik, you've heard your sister's statement. I'm going to give you the opportunity to respond. What do you say to what she has told this court? Tarik stood up. He was in control of himself. I'll give him that. He adjusted his position, looked at Judge Laika directly, and when he spoke, his voice was smooth. Tarik. With all due respect, Judge Laika, my sister is not lying. She is grieving. There is a difference. She loved our father. We both did. And when grief is very strong, it can make us see things the way we want them to be, rather than the way they are. I understand her. I do not blame her for being here today, but our father did write that will, and I was present when he wrote it. Judge Laika said nothing. She waited. Tarik. My father and I had a relationship that Nadia may not have fully understood. We had private conversations. Conversations that happened between just the two of us. He spoke to me about things he didn't speak about to anyone else, including his concerns about the future. He paused, gathered himself. Tarik. My father was worried. He knew Nadia was struggling. She had no income, no savings. He loved her children completely. I don't dispute that. But he was afraid that if the house was left to her directly, she might be forced to sell it to survive, to pay bills, to feed the children, and then it would be gone. The family home, gone. He didn't want that. He straightened slightly. Tarik. So he left it to me, because he trusted me to protect it, to maintain it, and to make sure Nadia and her children were cared for from it. He trusted me with that responsibility. He paused one more time, then added softly, Tarik, I intend to honor that trust. There was something about the way he said those last words. It sounded right. It sounded like the kind of thing a son would say. But it also felt like something someone rehearsed in front of a mirror until it felt natural. I looked at Nadia. She was looking at her brother. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were not soft. But they weren't angry either. They were the eyes of someone listening very carefully to a story they know is wrong and controlling every impulse to say so out loud. Judge Laika tilted her head slightly. Judge Laika. Tarik, you said you were present when your father wrote the will? Tarik. Yes. Judge Laika. You watched him sign it. Tarik. Yes, Judge Laika. Judge Laika. And you are aware that your father suffered a stroke 4 years ago? Tarik. Yes. A very small pause before that. Yes, barely anything. But it was there. Judge Laika. So when he signed this will 3 years ago, after the stroke, you watched him do it, and his hand did not shake? Another pause. Slightly longer this time. Tarik. His condition varied. He had good days and bad days. On the day he wrote the will, his hand was steadier than usual. Judge Laika. His hand was steady. Tarik. Yes. Judge Laika. On that particular day? Tarik. Yes. Judge Laika looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her pen and began to write. She wrote slowly, deliberately. The sound of the pen on paper was the only sound in the room. That silence, while she was writing and everyone was watching and no one knew what she was putting down, was the heaviest silence I have ever sat inside. It pressed on you from every direction. Then she stopped writing. She looked up. Judge Laika. Where was this will kept after it was written? Where was it stored? Tarik. My father kept it. At the house. In his room. Judge Laika. In his room. Tarik. Yes. In a private folder. He was a private man. Judge Laika. And your sister, who lived in that house with your father for years, who cared for him, who was there with him through his illness, she never knew this folder existed. It wasn't a question, but Tarik answered it like one. Tarik. My father kept it separate on purpose. He didn't want to create conflict while he was still alive. He knew it would be difficult for Nadia. Judge Laika. That small sound again. I have never heard such a small sound carry so much weight. It wasn't skepticism spoken out loud. It was quieter than that, and somehow that made it worse. Tarik's hand, visible on the table, tightened. His knuckles pressed down against the surface, and beneath the table, though I could no longer see it clearly from where I was sitting, I would have been willing to bet that knee was bouncing faster now. And then Judge Laika turned back to Nadia. Judge Laika. Nadia. The letters you mentioned, the ones written by your father after his stroke, where the signature is different, did you bring those with you today? Nadia. Yes, Judge Laika. I have 6 of them. She reached into the folder in front of her. She pulled out 6 envelopes. Old ones. The kind of envelopes that have been handled many times. The edges were soft from being opened and closed and reopened again. Some of the paper was slightly faded at the folds. She laid them gently on the desk in front of her. Judge Laika's assistant carried them forward. Judge Laika picked up the first one. She opened it slowly. She read the letter inside. She looked at the signature at the bottom. She put it down. She picked up the second. Read it. Signature. Third. Signature. Fourth. She did this quietly and thoroughly with all 6 letters. Nobody moved. I don't think anyone blinked. The room was so still that I could hear the faint sound of the paper as she turned each page. Then she put the letters down. She picked up the will, the document Tarik had submitted. She held the will in one hand and one of the letters in the other. She placed them side by side on the bench in front of her. She put on her glasses and she looked. She looked for a long time, moving her gaze from one to the other, back and forth, back and forth. I counted in my head. She looked for almost 2 full minutes, which doesn't sound long. But in that room, in that silence, 2 minutes felt like a different kind of time entirely. Then she set both papers down. She removed her glasses, and she looked at Tarik. Judge Laika. Tarik, please come forward. Tarik stood up. He walked to the front of the bench. He was still carrying himself upright. Still. But his face was different now. The composed, half-smiling mask he'd walked in with was completely gone. His expression was flat, empty, like a surface with nothing underneath it yet. Judge Laika. I have spent the last few minutes comparing the signature on the will you submitted, which is dated 3 years ago, against 6 letters written by your father during that same period and after. I am not a handwriting expert, I will say that clearly. but I have been a judge for 22 years, and I've seen enough documents, enough signatures, enough evidence to be able to say with confidence that the signature on this will and the signatures on these letters are significantly different. Very significantly different. She laid the papers flat on the bench. Judge Laika, I am going to ask you one question, Tarik. I want you to hear me carefully, because this is the most important question you will answer today. Perhaps the most important question of your life. She looked at him, directly, completely. Judge Laika, did you write this will yourself? What happened next is something I will carry with me for a long time. There was silence. Not the comfortable kind, not the polite kind, the real kind. The kind where you can feel a person's whole life sitting in the pause between what they've said and what they're about to say. I watched Tarik's face. I watched his throat move as he swallowed. I watched his left eye just once twitch. Just once. Tarik. No, he said it quietly, but he said it. Judge Laika. You are certain, Tarik. I am certain. Judge Laika nodded. Once, slowly. Judge Laika. Very well. Then you will have no objection to this court ordering a formal handwriting analysis. The room broke open. That is the only way I can describe it. The low murmur that had been held back by everyone in the room for the past hour, it came out all at once. People leaned toward each other. Someone near the back made a sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a word, somewhere between the two. I looked at Tarik. His hands were gripping the edge of the bench in front of him, white-knuckled. Both hands. His face was still, but his eyes moved sideways, to the left, toward his sister. And I understood something in that moment. He hadn't looked at Nadia all morning, not when he walked in, not when she gave her testimony, not once. But now, at this exact moment, he looked at her, and she was already looking at him. She wasn't angry. I expected anger, after everything. The papers, the court order, 2 months in someone else's spare room with 3 children. I expected her face to be sharp with it. But it wasn't. It was something else. Sad. She looked sad. The way you look at someone you once loved and now have to watch destroy themselves. Judge Laika allowed the murmuring in the room for about 10 seconds. Then, in a calm voice, Judge Laika. Order. 1 word. The room went quiet. Judge Laika. Tarik, I want to give you a moment right now. Before this proceeds any further, is there anything about your testimony today that you would like to change or add to? Anything at all? And I think that was the moment where it could have gone either way. Tarik stood there. His shoulders rose, then fell. He looked at his sister one more time, and she looked back at him. She wasn't offering him anything in that look. Not permission, not forgiveness, not blame. Just truth, like a mirror. Just the truth of who they were to each other and what had been done. And something in Tarik's face crumbled, not dramatically, not in a collapse, just quietly, like a wall that had been standing too long and finally gave way 1 brick at a time. He turned back to Judge Laika. Tarik, I didn't write the whole will. The silence that followed that sentence was absolute. Tarik, the original will. It was real. My father did write one. I found it in his papers after he died. It was real. He had written it maybe 2 years before he passed, but in the original, the house was left to both of us, equally, half to me, half to Nadia. He stopped. His jaw worked. Judge Laika. Continue, Tarik. Tarik. I changed 1 line, just 1 line, where it said to be shared equally between my 2 children I changed those words. I wrote over them. I made it say, to my son, Tarik. From behind me, very softly, someone said, "Oh, God." And Nadia? I was watching her the whole time. Nadia made a sound. It was small. I don't have a perfect word for it. It was the sound a person makes when something they already feared was true turns out to be exactly true. Not surprise. Something more painful than surprise. Something that is almost its own kind of grief. And then she pressed her hand over her mouth. She turned her face just slightly to the left. Her shoulders shook. Once. Twice. Her eyes were closed. She was crying. Very quietly. The most controlled, private kind of crying. Like she had promised herself she would not let this room see her fall apart. And she was holding to that promise even now. And she managed it. Even then, she managed it. She kept herself together. She kept her back straight. She kept her hand pressed flat over her mouth, and she breathed. I felt something twist very tight in my chest watching that. Tarik was looking at her. "Tarik, I'm sorry." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I know that doesn't undo anything, but I'm sorry." He was still facing Judge Laika, but his eyes went to his sister, and he said it to her. She did not look up at him. Judge Laika was silent for a moment after the confession. She looked at the papers. She looked at Tarik. She looked at Nadia. And I saw something, just for a fraction of a second, in Judge Laika's expression. Not pity, not triumph. Something quieter. The expression of someone who has seen too much of this. Too much of what grief and fear and greed do to families. And who still, after all of it, has not become numb to it. Then she spoke. "Judge Laika, Tarik, what you have admitted to today is not a small thing. I want you to hear that clearly. You deliberately altered a legal document, your father's will. The last statement of a man who can no longer speak for himself. You changed his words. You took away your sister's rights. You took away the home of 3 young children. And you did this at the lowest, most painful moment of their lives, while they were still grieving the same man you were grieving." Her voice was steady, not raised, not dramatic, but every word was precise, and every word landed. "Judge Laika, the house, the money, those things can be returned. What cannot be returned is the time. The 2 months Nadia and her children spent without a home, without stability, without knowing if they had somewhere safe to sleep. That time is gone. And no verdict I deliver today gives it back to them." Tarik stood with his eyes fixed on the floor. "Judge Laika, this court deals with what it can deal with, and here is what it can do." She straightened the papers in front of her. "Judge Laika, the will as altered and submitted by Tarik is declared null and void. It has no legal standing. The original will, as described today by Tarik, which left the property in equal share between both children, stands as the foundation for this estate. Until the original document is formally located and verified, this court orders the following. The family home is to be returned to joint ownership, with Nadia having full right of residence, effective immediately. She and her children are to be restored to that home without delay. In the room behind me, I heard the sound of people exhaling. It was audible, like the whole room had been holding one single collective breath and now let it go. Judge Laika. The matter of charges against Tarik for the alteration of a legal document will be referred to the appropriate authorities. That is a separate matter for a different proceeding. But this court strongly recommends a full and thorough investigation. Then she paused, and what she said next was not required. It was not a legal statement. It was not procedure. It was something Judge Laika chose to say. And that choice, that small human choice to say one more thing, is what I keep coming back to. She looked at both of them, at Tarik and at Nadia. Both of them at once. Judge Laika, your father worked all his life for that house. He thought he was leaving something behind that would hold his family together. Whatever happens now, whatever comes next in the room outside this one, I hope both of you find a way to remember that. He wanted you to have something that connected you, not something that broke you apart. She closed the folder. Judge Laika, this hearing is concluded. When Judge Laika left, the room started to breathe again. People moved slowly, quietly, like they weren't quite ready to leave the space yet, like they needed another moment to sit inside what they had just witnessed. Some people spoke to each other in low voices. One woman was shaking her head very slowly back and forth. A man near the front was rubbing his face with both hands. A few people were looking toward Nadia. I was looking toward Nadia too. She was still sitting. Her hands were flat on the table. Her head was slightly down. Her eyes were closed. She was still. Very still. Like she was in a place inside herself that was quiet and far away. Then the woman sitting closest to her reached over and put a hand gently on her arm. Nadia looked up, and she smiled. Not a big smile, not a triumphant smile, just a small one. Just at the corners of her mouth, the kind of smile that comes not from happiness, but from something more than happiness, from relief so deep it's almost like grief in reverse. The smile of someone who has been running for a very long time and has finally been told they can stop. Tarik walked past her on his way out. He stopped, directly beside her chair. He didn't say anything. She didn't look up, but he stood there for 2 or 3 seconds, right beside her, before he kept walking. I don't know what he was trying to say in that silence. Maybe he didn't know either. Oh, I sat in the back of that courtroom after everyone else was gone, just for a few minutes, and I thought about a man who had worked his whole life for one house, who wanted to give his children something that lasted, who thought he was giving them a foundation, and how that house, that ordinary, old, beloved house, had almost become the thing that destroyed what was left of his family. I thought about Nadia's 3 kids, about her 8-year-old son, who was at school right now, doing maths or reading or running on the playground, about her 6-year-old daughter, about her 2-year-old baby, none of them knowing that this morning their mother walked into a room and fought, with shaking hands and tired eyes and 6 old letters from her father, to give them back their home. I thought about how close it came to going the other way. If Tarik had held his ground, if he had refused the handwriting analysis and kept saying no, if Judge Laika had not asked that one question at exactly the right moment, did you write this will yourself? Things could have ended very differently for that family. That question. One question. And that brings me to something I can't quite shake. I didn't leave that courtroom feeling angry at Tarik. I know I probably should. What he did was real. What he put his sister and her children through was real. The 24-hour notice, the bags packed, the months in someone else's house, that was all real. But I left feeling sad for him. Because underneath everything he did, underneath all the altered documents and the courtroom confidence and the prepared answers, there was a brother who had also lost his father, who also had his own grief, his own fears, his own reasons he probably still hasn't fully faced, and who made one terrible choice that multiplied and multiplied until a judge was the only thing standing between his family and complete collapse. And mostly, I left that courtroom feeling something I didn't expect to feel. I felt grateful that Nadia did not give up, that she went through that house looking for old letters, that she showed up today with shaking hands and red eyes and a folder of evidence and sat down and told the truth clearly and simply. She didn't come in with anger. She didn't come in with drama. She came in with 6 letters from her father and the truth. And today, the truth was enough. I felt Judge Laika's decision was absolutely right. More than right. I felt it was exactly what a judge is supposed to do. Not just read the law, but look at the human beings in front of her and find the truth beneath all the paperwork and the prepared statements and the fear. And that thing she said at the end, he wanted something that connected you, not something that broke you apart. I keep turning that over in my head, because isn't that what it always comes down to? We fight over what we're left. We fight over houses and money and things. And underneath all of it, most of the time, somebody loved us and wanted to give us something that would last. And we almost always make it the thing that tears us apart. So that's what I witnessed in that courtroom today. I've been carrying it ever since. And now I've given it to you. Now I want to know what you think, because I have 2 questions, and I genuinely want your answers in the comments. Question 1. When Judge Laika asked Tarik, "Did you write this will yourself?" and he said no, do you think in that moment he actually believed he could still get away with it? Or do you think some part of him had already decided he was done? Because I keep going back and forth on that, and I want to know where you land. Question 2. If you were sitting in Nadia's chair today, if it was your sibling across the table, your childhood home on the line, your children waiting at home to find out what happened, could you have kept yourself together the way she did? Drop your answer below. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you felt. I read every single comment, every one. And if this story moved you, if you sat there and felt something, share it with one person, just one person, because these are real things that happen to real families, and they deserve to be heard. There are more courtroom stories coming, stories where the verdict surprises you, stories where you won't know who to root for until the very last minute, stories where the truth walks in at the last second, and stories where it doesn't make it in time. Subscribe so you're here when they drop. I'll see you in the next one.